Hi, I'm Nick Bailey, a co-founder of From Day One. In today's webinar, we're going to be exploring a timely topic, turning workforce aspirations into company policy, why employee fulfillment matters more than ever. This year, we're seeing companies shift focus and reassess their company vision and how to keep their employees engaged and supported during these unprecedented times. A company's sense of purpose can be proclaimed from the top, but employees are going to be more engaged and committed if they believe that their own hopes and ambitions are recognized by that organization and are reflected in its actions. At a time of economic and social uncertainty, how can leaders provide a vision of progress, both for individual employees and for the company? What are some of the benefits of dialogue, transparency, and learning when inspiring confidence for the future? Before we dive into that topic, I want to thank our partners, Indeed and Culture Amp, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about each of them. Indeed is the #1 job site in the world, with over 250 million unique visitors every month. In a rapidly evolving hiring landscape, Indeed is here to help with resources for employers. You can visit indeed.com/hire/resources for more information. Culture Amp is the leading people and culture platform, helping companies take action to improve employee engagement, retention, and performance. Culture Amp works with 3,000 plus culture-first organizations from across the globe to help them connect with employees in real time and understand what matters and to truly develop their people. Now, for a couple quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand about 24 hours after this event. So look out for an email in about 24 hours with that link. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from the Society of Human Resource Management. That's SHRM or SHRM. And look out for a written account of this conversation soon. That'll be on our website at fromday1.co. That's FROMDAYONE.co. In about an hour, that's 3 p.m. on the East Coast here, we'll have a Q&A session. So you can submit your questions at any time, including right now or whenever the urge strikes you, using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator. That's business journalist Lydia Dishman. She's a frequent collaborator of ours, and she reports and edits for Fast Company on tech and leadership, and has written as well for CBS Money Watch, Fortune, the New York Times, and many others. Lydia, thanks, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Nick, and thanks to my panelists for joining me and to the audience for spending this next hour and a half with us. We are grateful that you're here, and we promise you that this is going to be a lively and insightful and timely discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to jump right in and have everyone introduce themselves. But I'm going to ask you to add a little bit to your introduction and tell us about a moment when you felt that your employer recognized your hopes or ambitions, or perhaps flipping it, a point of time where you felt like you weren't recognized and you would have really liked to be. So Carmen, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carmen Bryant. I'm the Director of Marketing for the US at Indeed. So I have particular focus on B2B markets and marketing, and really trying to help connect leaders and decision makers with data, programs, insights, information that Indeed can offer. So we have quite a bit of scale, but we also want to make sure that we're able to deliver a really unique and personalized experience. I feel really fortunate in my career. I think that I've had really good success in having my hopes and aspirations recognized, but when I was very clear about what they are. I would say for myself personally, one of the challenges has been being thoughtful and reflective about what I want, and then being explicit about sharing what that is. And when I've done that, I feel like I've gotten really positive response from that.
So important to make those things known. I think a lot of times we just sort of assume that people are going to pat us on the back for doing a good job if we just kind of keep doing it. Not always. Jen, how about you? You're on mute.
See, and I tested it and it didn't work. Sorry about that.
You got to hold it down.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, everybody, but I'm Jen Cockrum. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for North American field operations for the Hertz Corporation. I support all of the HR field business partners who work throughout the United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, supporting our operations at our rental car facilities. As you probably know, Hertz is in Chapter 11 bankruptcy right now, and so we've had some really challenging times these last several months on top of COVID. But one of the things that I have been very lucky to have been given the opportunity is to work on special projects. I think that that's something that even throughout my career, early in my career, was given the opportunity to work on special projects that had a national impact or had a national, platform. And likewise, even recently, knowing the day-to-day challenges that we're all facing and the very busy day-to-day jobs that we have, I've been recognized, and others in my positions have been recognized that by saying, hey, we know that you can do more, and we think that you have value to add to the conversation, especially as it pertains to the business and the operations and the restructuring of the operations. So that's one way I feel that my company's been very good at recognizing myself and others in that way.
That's great, and especially in tough times, as you say, it's important to be recognized. Curtis, let's go next to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, and good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. So, I'm Curtis Brooks. I'm Vice President of Training and Development with U.S. Bank, and there, my primary responsibility is centered around career development, content curation for the organization, and DE&I education. And I think to your question, I would say, I think most of my panelists, peers have answered it, and I would probably say the same. I think about it in terms of mentorship. So the good leaders that I've worked with have really mentored me, not necessarily in a formal way, but more of a, informal mentoring, and then have, really provided me an opportunity to network and meet different level people within the company. So providing that visibility was important. And then from a project standpoint, really displaying that confidence in me, providing me the coaching where I needed on those various projects, but giving me projects that expanded my knowledge, my breadth and depth in terms of the function that I was working in. So, that's really what I've been fortunate to have in my career.
Never underestimate the power of a mentor, especially when it comes to networking. Annalisa, let's go to you next.
Hi, thank you. So glad to be here. I'm Annalisa Bluhm. I've been with General Motors now for over 15 years. My current day-to-day responsibilities have me overseeing both executive communications, so our C-suite, where they go, what they do, what they say, as well as strategic corporate initiatives. So we have a large breadth under our assignment fold. I would echo a lot of what everybody's saying here relative to the importance of being bold with your mentor. And don't be afraid to kind of forecast out into jobs that don't exist yet. In my personal experience about 8 years ago, I was starting to see these trend lines relative to younger purchase intendees and how they're shifting mindsets relative to cars and the role of shared vehicles and technology, and said, hey, this job doesn't exist yet, but if it did, I think I could bring a lot of value. 6 months later, a job was created, and I had the honor of being the first to hold it. So I think there's a lot of value in looking and trusting your mentor, but also kind of having a what if scenario, and don't just limit yourself to the jobs that you see. Don't be afraid to forecast a job that could be great for you.
Yeah, that's a serendipitously lucky thing to happen for sure.
Yeah.
Cassandra, how about you?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Cassandra Mitchell, Vice President of Corporate Responsibility for KeyBank in Washington State. I manage our philanthropic investments and engage in relationships with our nonprofits to help meet community needs. I'm also responsible for our Community Reinvestment Act requirements and activity, and I'm also responsible for our volunteer coordination and activity across the state. And then when I'm not doing my primary work, I also lead our employee resource group, the African Heritage Committee is what we call it. So, you know, I would honestly, everything that everyone else has said in regards to mentorship, coaching, it all kind of brings me back to a couple of scenarios or experiences that I had with some really good leaders. I started off in my career actually in human resources, and I remember getting into a position that I felt very qualified for, but at the same time, I was new in my career, and I had a leader, an HR manager at the time, who really took me under his wing and went above and beyond when it came to coaching and mentoring. Kind of what Curtis was saying, and Jen, it was a combination of getting me exposure to the right leaders, allowing me to work on projects that honestly I probably wasn't necessarily too prepared for, but he took a risk on me, and allowed me to develop and guide me throughout that process. And then Annalisa reminded me of another experience where I had went to the director of HR, and I had asked about developing a position. And it took a while, but she was super supportive and was able to create a position for me that I really excelled in. And it kind of goes back to also what Carmen was saying, when it's just being very vocal about what you want, and also having the right leaders in place to help guide you and coach you and mentor you. There's also a few experiences where I didn't have that leadership that I really desired and wanted, and didn't, in my opinion, help me in getting and reaching my goals within that organization. But it's all a learning process. Even in those situations, I was able to learn a lot about myself and how I respond in certain situations that only prepared me for where I am today.
Yeah, I have to agree that oftentimes the challenges really are the lesson. That's where the real deep lessons come from. You know, when you have the struggle and you have to overcome it somehow, and you have to tap into your own personal resources. But I did want to ask, you know, you're talking, all of you, about mentorship and coaching and, you know, having somebody guide you. My question is, how does your organization as a whole approach this type of employee fulfillment? Jen, I know that, you know, Hertz is in an interesting position right now, and we had talked previously about what you're doing. Can you speak a little bit about that first?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that we have experienced through the bankruptcy is a massive restructuring of the company. I think it's number one, I think that there is a lot of value in the adversity that we're going through in overcoming it. And so one of the things that we've really been trying to do is teach and focus and educate our frontline managers on what that really means, to be able to be in a situation that what you do on a day-to-day basis really truly matters. This isn't, you know, one little cog in a really great big wheel anymore. We're talking that, you know, we're half the size of what we were. And so, you know, coming to work every day really has a lot more meaning than it had before. And so we're communicating that in more intimate groups. We're doing those live when possible, you know, socially distanced, of course, but we're also doing them via Zoom, and we're getting very small groups where earlier in you know, Hertz's history, we might have had larger, you know, learning and engagement opportunities, 40 or 50 people. Now we're making those groups really small and having those really deep personal conversations throughout the process. The other thing that we're doing is, as the organization has shrunk, we've actually collapsed some of our business silos. So we're having some of those conversations about the HR functions that are following along with the business functions. So, you know, we had separate parts of the business for our airport business and our off-airport business and some other, you know, our car sales and this and that. We collapsed all of those. We said it doesn't make a difference anymore. We're all one Hertz. And as a result, one of the things that's been really remarkable is we're recreating the career paths now, where we may have earlier, you know, just had a career path in one area of the business. It was maybe a little harder to transition to another part of the business, but now we're saying, look, it actually makes more sense if we have well-rounded future leaders of the company that have those experiences in the multiple, you know, areas of the business. And so we're redesigning the career paths. You know, they don't look like lattices or even, you know, diagonals anymore. They're all over the place. And it's really helpful and remarkable, and it's really getting people some really key experiences that people are finding really valuable and fulfilling.
Curtis, I'm coming to you next. Has that changed at US Bank, career pathing? Have you noticed that there's been different approaches to encourage staff?
It is. So I would answer that question from the standpoint at the bank is that we're seeing two movements happen. So, and I think at some point they're going to meet in the middle, and they absolutely should. So what you're seeing from the top, from a corporate standpoint, is that we've had our traditional mentoring programs, but we've taken that and now started to focus on, okay, how can we look at cross-cultural mentoring? So being intentional about how we invite more people to the mentoring process, how we invite more mentors to the mentoring process. We've expanded from a corporate standpoint to, we've always participated in executive coaching, right? Probably at most companies, you know, externally, but we've created our own internal executive coaching program to where we can offer those services more intentionally, at less expensive costs, obviously internal. And so those are starting to make an impact from the top. And then from a corporate standpoint or enterprise standpoint, as we call it at the bank, we've also started to focus on career development frameworks. And I typically call like these frameworks, it needs to be structured and it needs to be flexible, right? Two sides of the same coin. Structured from the standpoint of it provides our employees at the various levels on how to develop and what those paths or recommended paths look like so that they can develop themselves. And then on the flip side of that coin, we need to ensure from a talent perspective that as we go forward 1, 3, 5, 7 years out, that we've anticipated to the best degree that we can what those new skill sets will be and start to put programs, again, career development programs in place to where we can upskill or reskill our staff so that we have, you know, talent that's ready when we need it. So that's happening from a corporate standpoint. And what you see, starting to see from the grassroots, and I say grassroots from the perspective of bottom up at the divisional levels, you're starting to see the different divisions at the bank start to say, hey, we want to focus more on career development as well. So they're starting to create, you know, their own through SharePoints or whatever, the university or academy-like structures that again give people a path on how to develop themselves. And it's doing the same thing that we're trying to do from a corporate standpoint. They're trying to ensure that their particular divisions, especially technology, that they have the right skill sets and capabilities to be able to operate their business. We're starting to see people ask more about, from a grassroots and divisional level, more about rotational programs. And again, it's all going back to the two sides of the same coin. How do we give opportunities for our people to develop some structure? And how do we make sure we have that talent ready, you know, now and for the future? So I think at some point you'll start to see those two things converge within the organization.
Top down, bottom up, meeting in the middle. Absolutely. So I want to juxtapose US Bank with KeyBank now. So Cassandra, what are you noticing there?
Yeah, you know, we've had a pretty robust learning and development program for quite some time, which is great. We encourage our employees to really own their career here at KeyBank by providing them with the resources and the tools and the systems in place to have that ownership. We've always had a robust internship programs and management training programs, rotational programs. It has shifted a little bit because of COVID for obvious reasons. But we also, kind of going back to owning your career, we've also just made sure that our learning and development system allows employees to gain any skill, technical or soft, that they want. So me being in corporate responsibility, if I wanted to learn more about commercial banking, I can go to our learning development system and go through the training that a new hire in commercial banking would go through, which is really good. We've also recently partnered with Udemy. And so all of our employees have access to their full library of training and courses and information. And so for us, you know, we have the very specific career path. And we're also starting to look at, similar to what Curtis also mentioned, we're also looking at how can we take an individual in one functional area and get them the training and the support to move into something completely different. So if I'm in the branch network and I want to learn more about, I don't know, capital markets, right? Not only is the training there, but also just looking at what does that career pathing look like, and also being really intentional about what employees need and want, knowing that it's going to look a little different based upon experience and background. But at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we have the tools and the resources available. And again, it also goes back to making sure our leaders have the tools to provide the coaching and the feedback when employees are going along that path to whatever it may be.
Annalisa, you said you've been there for 15 years, and I have to believe that a lot of people are there for a really long time. That's just sort of, you know, in a corporation like that, it's hard to kind of move out, you know, not just because you're comfortable, but because there are so many opportunities. What are you noticing in terms of, you know, changes with encouraging staff?
I think a lot of the challenges that we're having may be similar across the board to everyone who's on this panel about keeping the promises we made to all of our employees about caring about their careers, their well-being, providing mentorship opportunities, cross-functional opportunities, all of this learning juxtaposed against the COVID environment. Because what we're finding is that most people are having hard conversations about where they want to work, what they want to do, and what does satisfaction look like in their day-to-day life, now that we've had not only time to reflect, but the pressure of a pandemic to really call upon what we value. So in addition to, you know, the typical problems that any company would have in recruiting talent from a different generation and then giving meaningful assignments that allow them to grow, and then also cultivating the same similar types of experiences of growth and having meaty, interesting things to do as a, you know, mid-level employee who has about 10 years in, you know, there's a lot that we can do to dial up assignments, to give more autonomy, to give more responsibility, to provide more access to confidential items, to provide an opportunity to go spend a quick assignment in an area of the business that's completely foreign to them. We can make it worth their while to stay. But we continue to hear feedback, I think, from younger employees about what their expectations are as they enter the workforce. And I think for companies like ours that typically have people spending 10, 15, 20 plus years, it's a very different reality. And I think that now is incumbent on us as directors and managers. How do we create assignments that meet this new employee's definition of meaty and compelling and exciting, but also gives them a way to still build the skills that are requisite that we would typically have reserved this meaty, compelling, amazing opportunity for someone that may be 5, 7 years their senior. So it's calling upon us to get super creative and trying to find ways to provide that growth either through partnering or by recalibrating assignments or saying, hey, we've got this special project and you're leading and you're doing this and you're doing that. but I'm sure I speak for most of the people on the panel that COVID added a challenge, but it's also, you know, against this backdrop of the changing demands of the workforce, both because the talent pool is becoming more narrow, the job opportunities are becoming more enticing, and I think COVID made people rethink what they want out of their job and what they're willing to do to keep things like working from home or, you know, diversity of experience. So I think, you know, from my perspective as being someone a little more seasoned in spending the bulk, you know, out of a 20-year career, I've spent 15 years at GM. And my position may become a little more unique as those who are millennial and younger make different choices about where they wish to spend their career and their time.
Carmen, I'm coming to you at the end of this because you have a perspective both inside Indeed as well as with client partners. So what trends are you seeing broadly within the organization as well as without?
Yes, I'd say within Indeed, we've really, you know, our mission is we help people get jobs. And so that has been a huge rallying cry for us and for everybody that works there. And certainly at the beginning, it was really a galvanizing impact. And we were really doing everything we could, whether it was to match employers who were, you know, laying off employees with organizations that were trying to aggressively hire, putting out resources. So we really doubled down on the meaning for why people come to work at an organization like Indeed. And that translated into work, because a big part of what we try to do is to think about how do we innovate, how do we create new solutions. So there were, you know, product and engineering teams that were deployed, or cross-functional teams that were deployed to solve challenges. We saw, you know, sort of like virtual hiring, like inquiries increase 1,000%. You know, when all of this happened. So we really felt like we had a responsibility to try and address some of that. So our mission and meaning really became a huge rallying cry. And I would actually say, honestly, initially, it was almost, you know, euphoric. Like there was definitely a sense of energy, and we kind of had to address that as, you know, work from home continued and COVID continued, but it was really energizing initially. As we've talked, and I've actually myself had a lot of conversations with, you know, leaders in the TA and HR space, and you know, this is a very unique situation. And so it's, you know, certainly as we listen to everyone on the call, I don't know that there's one approach that people have been taking. I will say that we've been talking a lot about well-being and employee well-being, and how do we keep our employees, you know, just energized, make sure that they feel like a sense of trust, that they belong. And so that has been really all encompassing, I think, for a lot of organizations we're talking to, who are trying to make sure that the employees that are still within their organizations are, you know, having their, more than just their basic needs met, but also engaged. You know, one of the things, you know, we've discussed too, is as we look at the unemployment rate, and more, you know, there's more sort of unemployed people per job. There's, you know, certainly the expectation that you'll have more people to choose from when you're hiring. But we also know, because we can look at job seeker search behavior, that a lot of more passive people are not interested in searching anymore. They want to stay where there's stability. They're not as inclined to go and look for another opportunity if they feel that where they are is, you know, pretty solid. So keeping the employees you have engaged is going to be really important, because I do think it's going to be more challenging if you're trying to lure someone from another organization to leave that stable environment to come and work for you.
For sure. And I definitely want to dive into engagement, productivity, and well-being. But first, we're going to take a brief break. I'm going to invite Nick to come on and do our station identification.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to Remind anyone that has joined in progress that this is from day one, and we are exploring employee fulfillment today. Our sponsors for today's panel are Indeed and Culture Amp. And as a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time, including right now. That's at the bottom of your screen. There's a little Q&A button. We will answer as many as we can during the Q&A session, which will start at the top of the hour. Thanks so much, and back to you, Lydia.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, we've had several discussions on previous webinars about employee engagement, about well-being. And what I find really interesting is how differently people are measuring things like well-being, like productivity. You know, these sort of intangibles have become really necessary metrics for people to understand where everybody is, especially with people working remotely. So Cassandra, I'm going to turn it to you, and why don't you tell us a little bit about how you're seeing different types of metrics. What are you measuring for, and how are you doing it?
Wow, well, within the banking environment, we've seen an increase in productivity for sure over the last 6 months. We've been, the COVID has put, not only created a different work environment for us from a safety perspective, but from a production perspective, when you think about the payroll protection loans that have come through all the financial institutions, we were literally all hands on deck. Like everyone, even myself and my team, were processing loans. And here in the state of Washington, we've seen a huge increase in mortgages as well. And so the work with anyone that you talk to, everyone is, even though we're all, for the most part, except for those who work in the branches, are working remotely still, people are working harder and people are working longer hours. And so the performance metrics have definitely shifted. And I'm not that involved on the performance management side, but when I talk to employees, what I'm hearing is they're given some grace, first of all, because it's a very stressful environment. So our folks who are on the front lines, who are meeting with clients by appointment and really working in those KeyBank branches, you know, God bless them. They have been working really hard, and at the same time having to deal with just their own health concerns and issues, and the whole wellness, well-being that Carmen was talking about. We have probably kicked that in probably tenfold now, and just to make sure that our employees have all the information, the resources, and the tools they need to maintain just emotional, mental, and physical health. And so we quickly recognize that without the employees feeling safe and having that those resources available to their own well-being, the productivity wouldn't have been there, honestly. You know, so for us, while I can't really name the specific metrics, I do know many of the leaders have just provided a little more leniency around the expectations right now in the moment. There's just a lot of personal stress that employees can't leave at the door. And so we're making sure that our leaders are really cognizant of that and really taking time to recognize that we're all human beings. And while we are definitely a sales culture, and we are all about driving numbers and results, at the end of the day, we need our employees to be healthy, and we need them to feel like they're in a place where we are taking care of them so that they can take care of our clients. And so it's a lot right now, you know, even in this transition of, you know, things starting to open up and people are getting a little more comfortable being face-to-face, but still socially distancing. It all impacts productivity. And so for us, it's really just making sure that we're allowing our employees we have the tools for them to be successful without putting too much pressure on them around performance.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're sort of being hit with a double whammy. Obviously, the pandemic because everybody's stressed out and we're not used to working this way. Many of us aren't. And then you have the racial injustice, the murders of innocent people. And so, yes, the flexibility, the leniency has to be there, but when you have nowhere to go, a lot of people tend to just work longer hours, which can contribute to burnout. And then you add other stresses on top of it. Jen, I'm going to come to you next because it sounds like a lot of things are being turned on their ear at Hertz. So how are you measuring this, and how are you making sure that everybody's okay?
You know, one of the things that we measure on a monthly basis and have for many years is our customer satisfaction. And that's through these NPS scores that we get, Net Promoter Scores. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with them, but we have over the last several years been able to tie those really, really closely to the employee engagement surveys that we do on an annual basis. And so we had traditionally done employee engagement surveys through Mercer in the October-November timeframe. And you can, graph almost an exact straight line. It's amazing. The higher the engagement, the higher the NPS score. So one of the things that we've been really keeping a close eye on as we have been working through this pandemic and the economic impact to Hertz, as well as all of the social injustice issues that have been happening across the country, is we've been really keeping an eye on those Net Promoter Scores and focusing on those areas where we see a huge delta. Right? If we see, something that they had traditionally been, medium to high and now they're very low, we will actually conduct skip levels or focus groups with the employees, try to understand if there's something there that is a stressor to them that we can help with as an organization. If there's a safety concern, we've done a lot of focus, even since the bankruptcy, around employee safety. Because specifically with a lot of the protests that have been going on in some of the cities, we've had a lot of our locations, that have been affected by that. We've also, again, I like what you said, Cassandra, about remembering that people are human, because not only are employees human, our customers are human too, and our customers are feeling a lot of stress. They're, in some cases, and especially, early on, they weren't traveling for fun. They were traveling because they had to, because somebody was sick and was, dying, or they were, having some kind of crisis in their own lives, and they were coming to our counters and sometimes having, poor interactions with our customer service representatives, where, we had to really also rethink the way that we ask our customer service reps to interact with our customers too. That empathy and the de-escalation procedures that we've implemented. That's on top of, Hertz global safety standards and our enhanced cleaning that we have to do for our cars. We also had to do some enhanced people skills in recognizing that, we have a lot of complications going on with everybody, customers, employees, managers, shareholders, you name it, it's just been one of those things. We've used that Net Promoter Score to kind of be the beacon, if you will. But again, we use that human interaction with with my team, the HR business partners that are in the field, that really do try to keep a really tight pulse on what's going on and how people are reacting, and if they need help, we're providing it when possible.
Curtis, I'm going to go to you next because you wear a lot of hats, and one of them is the DEI hat. And I'm just wondering, with a customer-facing organization like a bank, frontline workers, as you will, no one is immune. How are you handling employee engagement, making sure that everybody's doing okay?
Yeah, so, one of the things for us when you think about our values is to do the right thing. And that extends both outside the company, so doing the right thing for our customer base, but it also applies internally, making sure we're doing the right things for our employees. So, you think about production, you were talking about production numbers and metrics. Those are obviously going up. I think the ladies before me hit the point that people are obviously working harder. They're working differently because we're in this virtual space, with the exception of our branch employees. So they're working differently, but they're working harder. And I think the reason that we see, or the reason that I see that they're doing those type of things is because we are, what I heard earlier, lending a lot of grace, and we're being very empathetic. We're rolling out programs, for example, Boss to Coach, so teaching our leaders how to be coaches, teaching our leaders how to manage and lead in a virtual environment, and making sure that they're engaging their team. We're showing a lot of effort, extending a lot of effort to show our employees, again, we understand that they're human, we understand that they have families, whether it's the social piece that we're facing, the racial pieces, whether it's COVID and, hey, I'm a working mother, I'm a working father, and I have a child, and my child is not going to school and they're being, homeschooled essentially, or going to virtual school. So really giving people the tools and resources, the empathy, the grace to say, hey, we want to help you, we see you, we recognize it, and we want to do whatever we can from a company perspective, macro, and whatever we can do from a micro perspective. So you're a direct manager to help you walk through this period. And so because of all those efforts, again, whether it's D&I or whether it's the, COVID, we're showing that to our employees, and I think they're showing up in terms of, production numbers. So I guess I would sum it up. I mean, I heard it earlier and I thought it was perfect. So extending a lot of grace and being very empathetic and understanding to our internal population, and then in turn doing that to our external customer base.
I keep hearing grace, patience, empathy, flexibility. Those are like the words that are rising to the surface with almost every discussion I have when it comes to workplace issues. Annalisa, what are you seeing?
Well, I would echo the same thing relative to just grace and empathy. We're now dealing for the first time everyone's intersectionality brought to the table all at once. And to the point made earlier, for many, coming to work was a place where there was a boundary, and I entered the door, and now all I am is a person who comes to work and does these tasks, and I go home, and now I put on my mom hat or my dad hat or my caregiver hat. And now you have all of these things coming at you at once. And the data that we have, because we do a lot of qualitative and quantitative data, we do it at multiple frequencies, biweekly, weekly, quarterly, across all audience subsets globally. And the data has been consistent since the start of COVID. We see a lot of benefits for those who can work from home. In our salaried workforce, we're hearing that people like having the flexibility to cook dinner and be on a conference call and not have to be on a commute. But at the same time, that idea of boundaries is gone. My commuting time has now become working time. So my productivity is up, but we're also now seeing indices of burnout. And I would say that it's in the one-on-one conversations that I have with team members, or we have a internal communication tool that functions a lot like social media. It's called Yammer. I'm sure others have similar tools, or Slack. And that's where you start to see like the sharing of gifts, or the, oh my God, when is it Friday? I'm so exhausted. And I would encourage all of us, if you don't have either a Teams chat or a Slack, or even a simple text message thread with your team, this is where I get all of the data, and I can start to sense and feel when my team needs a break. We've been encouraging late start or early leaves, just easy, simple ways for them to say like, hey, I need to take a break. This week was overwhelming, because I have no idea what's going on and compounding their personal lives in addition to the assignments that they're being given. And you can hear that tension, I think, more. We ask the question directly in the Pulse surveys. How do you feel? They're worded differently because there are people who are better at this than I am, who know how to ask the question to get the right response. But in the one-on-one conversations, I feel that most of us are probably having with our team members, that's where it really feels like the data is being validated, that we are seeing people who are working probably the hardest they've ever worked, but not just at work, it's also within all these other intersectional spaces, compounded by the stress of a pandemic and the social justice conversation. and the uncertainty of an election, and. So that grace and that empathy are the most important thing we can do as team leads or as managers, directors, vice presidents, and pushing that perspective down so that it is unquestionable what our promise is to our employees, that we'll work with you on a solution, because one solution for one team member may not be the right choice for the next. So having that grace and fluidity built into the corporate structure, I think is a little new for some of us who are in large corporate staffs. But I think it's a refreshing change and could be then interpreted in other areas where maybe it's a good thing that we're reevaluating how we come to the table and how we provide that level of flexibility, and probably will aid long-term and work-life balance moving forward.
Carmen, are you using more formal metrics, or are you having check-ins, or is it a combination of both?
All of the above. I think all of the things that all of the panelists have shared are things that we've done as an organization and that I've leveraged myself. We have an employee engagement survey. And so right now, I'm doing the exercise personally of doing listening sessions with my org to really kind of understand, and to your point, Anna, that's where you start to get some of the qualitative insight. There are certain functions within Indeed that have very specific metrics, like our sales functions, our CS functions, our product and engineering functions. And similarly, we saw productivity go through the roof. I shouldn't say through the roof, that's aggressive, but it was, certainly higher than we would have expected given everything that's going on. And so what's been really the challenge is to get direct managers to manage not task, but a body of work. Because people really need flexibility, for all of the reasons that everyone has mentioned. And, I think Indeed, at least within the marketing organization, and probably HR and others, has been fairly flexible and fluid. We are a fairly geographically dispersed organization that's accustomed to using Zoom and, working from home. But it still required that, we adjust to this environment and COVID. And so one of the other things that Indeed did was to have global U days. We have a fairly generous PTO policy, but where are people going, right? Like, people weren't taking time off because it's, I'm going to take time off to help my son, my 11-year-old son, do homework, or, sit on the couch while my husband is trying to do work. So we had global holidays, so no one was working. And then the pressure to be online and in touch with others, is considerably less. And we had our first one the Friday before Memorial Day, and I don't think I realized until that moment just how necessary it was to unplug. So I think the two big things is, yes, productivity has gone up, but it's really trying to manage all of the other pieces. So really trying to work with managers to manage the body of work, not the minutia of the task, and really creating opportunity, and also encouraging leaders to lead by example, and take time off and disconnect, and do the things that they need to do to stay healthy and sane.
For sure, it's so important. I want to go over to Cassandra, because one of your points of responsibility is sort of working outside with partner organizations, philanthropic. So how does that help sustain the social aspirations as well as the emotional aspirations of employees? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's it's different, right? I mean, COVID, the COVID pandemic was one issue. And then it rolled into the pandemic around social and racial justice. And in working with nonprofits, if you sit on a board, they are struggling right now. And any help they can get from an employee base is welcome. And for us, we've always created this culture of connecting with your community and really being involved. And so our employees, most sit on boards, most have a nonprofit that they're tied to. And being able to, while we're not able to volunteer the same way that we have pre-COVID, being able to provide either an extra level of expertise to our nonprofit partners or money to our nonprofit partners. We started off with a COVID response fund, then it shifted to a racial justice fund, and then because of the fires, we have another fund for the Red Cross. And so over the last 6 or 7 months, we've basically really just tried to provide an environment internally and also in how we show up externally to really show support. And it's needed right now. I mean, we're having conversations internally and even with the nonprofits that we've never had before around race and around systemic racism. You know, I was in human resources for about 20 years, and we are finally uncovering the layers of issues that we were at one time very hesitant to talk about, right? Which, in my opinion, prevented us from moving forward. And internally, being able to have the conversations and really just create a safe place for employees to talk, to share, more importantly, to learn from each other, and to also, I would say, just see a different perspective of what's going on externally, but also how it's impacting your fellow coworker, for example. And so, you know, for us, working with nonprofits right now, it's a time like no other. It's a relationship that we need them, they need us, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Corporate responsibility can't do it by themselves. We can't do it alone. Nonprofits can't do it alone. The government can't do it alone. Together, we have to come to collectively solve some of our community challenges. Here in Seattle, we have an affordability issue, which results in a high number of homelessness, specifically right now amongst youth. And I'm talking, you know, under the age of 18, you know, the numbers are really heartbreaking. And so those are just some examples of how we just have a lot of employees who recognize the need within the community and the help that they're all reaching out for. And we're all just stepping up to in whatever way we're comfortable with to kind of close that gap. And that involvement with our community helps relieve some of the stress that we're feeling also at work, right? The overworking, those long hours that I talked about, and it all comes back to really being able to have an employee who feels fulfilled and engaged in what they do. And so having that balance, I think, is really important, because so many of us, you know, while we're working long hours, we also want to know, what else can I do to help the community outside of my bubble that I work and live in? And offering those opportunities of engagement with our nonprofit partners have really, really helped. And then when it comes to the social justice conversations, you know, so far I've led 4 conversations across our market, and the feedback that I'm receiving from employees is heartwarming, and it's also helped me feel hopeful around the change that's needed. You know, we're encouraging people to be uncomfortable, right? And that's huge right now, because for so long we didn't want to have those conversations, and we, like I said, we kind of tiptoed around it. But now that we've created this space, people are feeling uncomfortable and they're okay with it, you know, and it's really helping move us along and creating a culture. And I'm starting to see a shift in our culture where we've always talked about building sense of community and being your authentic self, and we receive all these awards around diversity, equity, and inclusion, but to finally create a space where people feel that inclusion, and people feel like they're respected, and people feel like I have a voice, and people feel like I have a seat at the table, and the list goes on and on. That's really amazing to see, that transformation. And that's, again, in my opinion, what brings us back to employee engagement and employee fulfillment.
For sure. And I think that, inclusion is about that. You want to feel like you're part of something. You want to feel like you belong to the organization, that the organization's mission and vision resonates with your personal values. And what better way than to, be all hands on deck with a community effort. And of course, research also proves that volunteering is a great stress reliever. Once you start thinking about someone else's problems, you're less likely to think of your own. But I want to talk more about this idea of conversations, because it sounds like all of you are having conversations on a lot of different levels that you've never had before. And so with regards to career pathing, do you find that dialogue and transparency is becoming more of a thing and people are coming to you with their goals? Annalisa, you're nodding very vigorously, so I'm going to go to you first.
It's also could be because I'm first generation American and I'm Italian and I gesture with every part of my body. But yes, I think especially because people are spending so much time rethinking what's important to them, and they want to know that even though they're working from home, there's still a path for them to contribute and contribute well. I tend to see it also as a career hedging move. I feel that because I don't know how everyone else on the panel feels about this, but I continue to hear from team members across the function and in other functions that they're afraid of what their performance review is going to look like at the end of the year, because we've never performed this way. So how we would typically evaluate a performer, and we do the 9-box leveling towards the end of the year that contributes towards merit and bonus, they don't know how to interpret their performance against what's currently going on. So I feel that part of this is saying, hey, I'm committed to you. I'm committed to this job. I want to see career growth and performance. But at the same time, I'm looking for some feedback from you relative to my performance in this environment, because I don't know how to interpret this, and I don't know, am I safe? I feel that right now, especially with all the other things that are going on, we're almost at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy relative to safety. And it is, I don't know how everyone else on the line feels too. I feel like I have to check in daily with my team, remind them that they are valued, that they are wanted here, that their contributions matter, that we're all very safe together. Thank you for taking the precautions and staying home, et cetera, and so forth. We sent masks to people's homes. So I do feel like we're operating in this space that continues to be this mutual check-in. Am I okay? Do you still think I'm valued? Yes, you're valued. Continue. So I tend to see those one-on-one conversations as being the time where your honesty and your commitment to your team shines the most, and where that bank of trust you've built with them, this is kind of where you're able to execute it in full force, and where they start to build that mutual trust in absence of a real live meeting.
Jen, do you find that there are more transparent dialogues happening in terms of career pathing now that everything's changing?
Yeah, I definitely feel that there are more frequent, much more transparent conversations. I'll be honest and say I don't think we figured it out yet, though. It's one of those things that we continue to go down a path, and we think we're doing the right thing, and then we go, ooh, maybe not, right? But I think too, I'll echo what Annalisa said, is we've had some of those conversations around performance reviews. I mean, what do we do? How do we do this when our business is down, so drastically? And do we even bother, with the process this year? I just came from a meeting where we were just talking about this and decided, no, we actually, we still don't know, what direction we want to head, because there have been a lot of, if there have been people that have exited the organization, there have been a lot of people that have changed roles. they maybe don't have that bank of trust yet with their new teams because they're brand new to the team. And, you know, we've got a lot of new leaders in place that we had a leader that was, you know, retired or, you know, left the organization that was a very beloved leader. And so, you know, we've just had so much change in that area that, you know, having those conversations has just, it's absolutely paramount of importance, but it's also not enough. I mean, to your point, Annalisa, about telling them every single day, I feel like I could give an update every single day on the bankruptcy and people would still be saying, I don't know what's going on, you know, because there's a feeling of mystery. And so it is just, you know, continuing to, how do you build trust? You show up every day. You know, how do you build trust with your team? You talk to them every day. And so, you know, that's what we're doing right now. And we haven't resolved it. We haven't cracked that nut, but we're working at it and continuing to try to get there. But we're doing so by being as transparent as we absolutely can be.
Okay, we're going to pause briefly because we're at the top of the hour. Nick?
Hello, how's it going? So thanks to everyone who has been participating in this employee fulfillment webinar. Thanks again to our sponsors, Indeed and Culture Amp. And thanks to you for joining us. And especially thanks to all those who've submitted questions. We have quite a few and we'd love to get more. So check the bottom of your screen. There's the Q&A button. Feel free to ask away and I'll turn it back over to Lydia, who will pose some of those to our panel now. Thanks so much, Lydia.
Thank you. Yeah, we do have a number of questions. We'll try to get to as many as possible. This first one I love because you all are working for fairly large organizations, but Emily says, any recommendations for a small company that's working with minimal budget but want to recognize great employees and help them develop? I'm sure you all have something to say about this, so take it away. Who wants to go first?
Hey, I'll jump in there. This is Curtis. I would say that big budget, small budget. The best thing you can do from my perspective and what's worked for me is to get to know your people. And everybody wants to be rewarded and recognized differently. So again, regardless of your budget size, get to know your people, understand what's important to them, what they value. And I think that will direct how you begin to reward and recognize those employees. You know, from a developmental standpoint, again, it goes back to listening, understanding their goals and how they want to develop, what the company's goals are. And if you can possibly align those, that's great. And then giving them the freedom and some coaching, some mentoring, and some direction on how to find those opportunities. And I'll say, just like this webinar, there are a number of low-cost, no-cost developmental opportunities out there. You just have to know where to look to find those opportunities. And if you can begin to involve them on projects at whatever level, whether it's, hey, your role in this particular project is to listen in this meeting, to understand and let's talk about it afterwards, or give them some other active role in a project that starts to expand their knowledge, their understanding, that right there is reward. But I would say the base of what I would share is get to know your people and learn how they want to be rewarded and recognized and what their goals are. And that'll direct you on what you should do.
Someone else want to add?
Sure. I like that she used the word recognize, because when I hear recognize, I don't think budget. Reward to me, I'm thinking like some kind of like monetary, you know, award. So I really like what Curtis said about kind of understanding what's important to people. And all of the different opportunities that folks can have. I mean, I think another kind of really low cost, no cost solution could be, depending on how large your organization is, always find that peer nominated sort of like awards are really, you know, people love them, whether it's something that's done with their peers or maybe done with customers. And that's maybe just one or two people, but I think something that could potentially be very high profile and very highly visible, but also, you know, no cost. It works on my team is what I'll say.
I'll just add one more thing. You know, echoing Curtis, I think the most valuable thing that you can offer somebody is your time, and taking the time to talk with them about their career aspirations, putting together an enhanced development plan for them that's specific. You know, that's more than just the pencil whipping, hey, do this, do that. You know, really taking time to dig into, you know, what their career goals are. And I'll also tell you, you know, in the midst of Chapter 11, we are very, very limited on what we can do as far as monetarily. And cash flow is king in a situation like this. And both our CHRO and our CEO of Hertz are very big proponents on handwritten cards. I know it sounds very strange and cheesy, but I am telling you, people get a handwritten card from somebody like that in those positions, and they cherish them, and they hang them on their bulletin boards, they hang them on their fridge at home. You know, someone told me the other day they read it to their family, you know, at dinner. And so I think that there are a lot of things like that that you can do to recognize employees, you know, on a service anniversary, on, you know, some big achievement that are really low cost, that just take some time.
Another thing too that we've been recommending from a overall developmental thing for our manager tiers and below is that at the start of every meeting, you can start off with a moment of gratitude where everyone can just do a quick shout out to someone on the team or outside the team that made their lives easier that day. And I think when you begin to start with gratitude and highlighting moments that mattered or people that mattered, that recognition really is genuine and can kind of fill that need without any budget. But if you start with gratitude, I think the rest kind of follows. And for those with kids, we call it like filling the bucket. And I find the terminology is one-to-one on the corporate side.
I love the idea of just a simple thank you. You know, we are so busy and so stressed out that, you know, a lot of times people just forget to say thanks at the end of the day. Like, it's a struggle. Some people are working, you know, 2 to 4 hours longer than they usually do. And I just, you know, I have to put a plug for my employer here. We have a weekly kudos at our edit meetings, and it's a peer thing. And I think that really goes a long way, you know, as you were saying before about, you know, just having one of your colleagues recognize you for work that you're doing, in addition to just somebody saying thank you. That's really kind of a great way, and it's free. You know, all you need is a Google Doc. Moving to this next question, which I think is really interesting. How do you handle course corrections, negative feedback, or other performance issues in the current environment? I'm especially thinking about performance issues that should be correctable, like someone needs a change in responsibilities rather than a termination. I'm going to go to all of you with this one because I think we cannot have too many good ideas on this. So, course correction, who wants to go first?
I think I'll jump in there again. I guess I like jumping in there. So for me, it would have to go back. So because of the question, I would say, okay, tell me about your relationship with the person and with the people that you're leading that you need to make a course correction. Have you, I guess I'm asking questions versus answering it. Have you been making course corrections and having the necessary conversations, important conversations all along? And if you have, you would have been course correcting all along, or have you just waited, you know, until the end and now you have to go left immediately? And you've been going right. So really tell me about your relationship. How do you have you been having these conversations before, or have you not? And then, you know, for me, it's really just about, you know, being empathetic and really having a conversation around the goal. Here's the goal. Here's what we need to be. Help me understand what's preventing us from getting to that particular goal. And based on what you hear, now you know what path you need to take. But I would say overall to that question, you probably should be having conversations frequently with your staff. And you can course correct that way versus wait until it's gotten to a really negative point.
I would agree with Curtis wholeheartedly. At GM, we encourage weekly or bi-weekly check-ins with your team. And that check-in should include something that you notice that they did well and something that if they had the opportunity again, perhaps do differently. But I firmly agree with you, Curtis. Waiting until performance review time to give negative feedback hurts both of you. And I think it is a challenge for most people to provide that feedback in a way that's actionable, as well as comes off in such a way that says, like, I'm making a commitment to you that I will help you. And if you need a book to help develop those skills, there's a book called Crucial Conversations that we give to a lot of our team members as a means of development. And then another one that we do is called Strength Finders. It's a book as well as a skill assessment. And I think that if you apply those two lenses and those two resources, one, you get a better sense of what that person feels their strengths are and where they could have some assistance in terms of the delta between where they want to be and where they want to go. But the Crucial Conversation book in particular, if this is an area that makes you really uncomfortable, I found a lot of success in providing that as a developmental tool to managers and to other people who are for the first time in a position where they have to give difficult feedback to either a peer or someone that they lead. But it is a skill that needs building. Giving feedback isn't easy for some.
First I will share that Indeed does quarterly reviews. So there's not like an annual cycle, and I actually have to say I greatly prefer that. And 2 of those cycles are 360-degree feedback. So we're at the end of our Q3 review right now. So there is, and then there's like monthly reviews, like monthly conversations. So there's a lot of opportunity for feedback. So I would say, and I don't know if it was kind of the implied question being how to address course correction and negative feedback during this time versus another, I would say it's the same. You know, I think you have to be very clear and transparent. I think transparency is very important. And you should be very clear in terms of how decisions are being made and conversations are happening. But I think it's the same sort of, you know, approach that you would use another year. And you know, it's interesting. Now that I'm at home all day with my husband and son who are all working, I'm much more involved in his work life than he's ever been in mine. And so we've had this conversation, and you know, how do you address what the complications are in someone's life and how do you weave that into the process? And, you know, this is my personal opinion, so I, you know, can't sort of speak for everyone on the panel, but I think, you know, unless you know everyone's personal experience, it can be very dangerous to start to make assumptions about an individual person's experience and how it's affecting their performance. So I go back to what Curtis and Annalisa were saying about you need to be able to have that conversation one-on-one if you feel like that there is something specific that needs to be addressed that maybe you don't have visibility into.
Yeah, before we go on, I did want to point that out because I feel like there's a delicate balance between having this grace and patience and flexibility and understanding, and then somebody actually not performing up to snuff. And so, you know, you want to be mindful, you want to be empathetic, but then you still have to get your work done. So what does that look like? Cassandra, you're nodding your head, so I'm coming to you next with that.
I'm disagreeing with what everyone has said. It kind of goes back to what we shared earlier, you know, being human first, right? And really understanding that there's a lot going on with people personally. But again, not allowing, well, I don't want to say not allowing, I guess just giving the grace, right? You know, and making sure, I've always been a fan of 360 reviews, regular conversations. There should never be a surprise when it comes to the formal performance review time. Everyone, you know, both parties should know exactly what the conversation should be about and what's expected from each other. And you know, from my experience when I was in HR, I think sometimes, or a lot of times, again, and this goes back to what Curtis and Annalisa were saying, a lot of times leaders don't like having these uncomfortable conversations. when there is a very clear course correction or performance concerns. But I believe it becomes less frightening or challenging when you've had the conversations along the way, right? When you've been able to provide very objective, clear examples of what's expected, but also realizing, again, right now, we're in times where there's so much going on personally that we just need to make sure that we've done everything we can to make sure that person is successful, right? So as a leader, making sure, kind of doing your own self-assessment. What have I done to make sure that I've given this employee every opportunity to be successful? And if you haven't, then, you know, that's something you have to think about and fix.
Jen, last but not least, any other additional thoughts?
The only thing I'll add is, Carmen, I really liked what you said about having the performance reviews quarterly, because I think one of the things that we've learned that's a little bit different than what we've done in the past is that we have to set shorter term goals. You know, everything changes so quickly. And if you think about when we set our goals back in January and February, I mean, you know, it's kind of laughable how different everything is. And then, you know, you fast forward another 60 or 90 days and they're different again. And so in a way, this might sound kind of weird, but, you know, the traditional performance improvement plans that everybody in HR knows about, where you set those short-term goals and you have that 30-day, 60-day plan, you know, if you can kind of approach it in that way with everybody, not that it's an improvement plan, but it's just a plan. And it's, you know, really one of the ways that I found for myself that I can get things done and have that kind of shorter term, you know, focus while still keeping an eye on a longer term strategic, you know, goal. You know, I think our organization is ready for, you know, potentially rolling that out to our managers front line, you know, where we talk about, okay, what do we want to accomplish this month? Because we're not sure what this is actually going to look like. We think that forecasting, you know, beyond 8 or 10 weeks is probably not, you know, feasible or valuable at this time. So I think making those goals a little more short term can also help you assess if somebody does need a course correction in a more quick, you know, manner, and help you make those adjustments in a real-time basis rather than, you know, at review time or, you know, when you have that meeting with them to talk about their performance.
We have another question about how can I tell if employees are comfortable sharing their career path ambitions? I think this one's interesting just because it's kind of like wrapped into how comfortable you are talking about your well-being with someone. So yeah, what do we say to this question?
I'll start. I guess for that question, I would say that trust goes both ways, right? And, you know, sometimes to build that trust with your team, you have to trust them that they're telling you the truth. And, you know, I've often in a new team environment, you know, had that kind of a conversation at the beginning of the relationship where I said, look, you know, I'm going to trust you and I'm going to trust that everything you're telling me is what you really mean. And I'm going to do the same. And, you know, I guess I would say, you know, how can you tell? I'm not 100% sure how you can tell. I wish I knew, but, you know, I think that again, building that trust both ways, it's one of those parts of the relationship between the manager and the, you know, and the employee that you really have to foster kind of from the beginning.
I think it's also too to remember that everyone has different communication styles and preferences. And until you've built that trust, like Jen is saying, there could be other ways that they, as an extrovert or an introvert, may feel better telling someone else or feel better confiding in their mentor, and then giving permission for them to do that and say they can circle back to you until that trust between you and your employee is established. So don't forget there's an ecosystem around you. And I think it goes back to what most of us have said, that it really is drilled down by your employees' preference and how they feel rewarded, or how they wish to tell you about their career ambitions, or have they spent time even thinking about what they want to tell you about their career ambitions. So I guess provide a safe space to know that you're trustworthy, show that trust day in and day out, but also consider other ways by which that person could maybe leverage someone else that they trust in a way that isn't gossip or telling, another person, but in a way that they're confiding to their mentor and knows that they've given that mentor permission to now tell you, because maybe they're just not comfortable yet. And that's okay, right? Like, there's different ways that people respond, and we have to give room for all of that.
Anyone else want to add anything?
I'll probably take a slightly different spin on it. Just thinking about that question for a second. The fact that that question came up, I would come back with a few questions before I answer it, which is, tell me about your culture. Tell me about your organizational culture. Tell me about your team culture, right? Because it makes me wonder, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing to talk about your career aspirations? And if it's a bad thing, then I understand your question. How would I tell if somebody's comfortable, right? So really, thinking about your culture of your organization and your team culture, and what that's creating for your employee around talking about their career. And then beyond that, I would say it goes back to your relationship, your trust between you and the employee. And hey, just make it super simple. Just ask, are you comfortable talking about your career and your aspirations? And I think they'll tell you. They'll tell you, or they'll give you some indication that you can read into that they're comfortable or not comfortable. But don't overcomplicate it. Just ask.
So another question, and you all sort of addressed this tangentially at the beginning of the discussion when you were introducing yourselves, talking about your own personal goals. Is there something that an individual can do to self-assess and sort of understand what their own career aspirations and ambitions are that they could then bring to a supervisor? What have you personally done to sort of figure out what your career goals are? And this is for all of you. If nobody goes, I'm going to pick somebody.
I was going to kick off.
I can go. Oh, go ahead, Carmen.
One, I feel like, it changes. It's not like I have this constant sort of idea in my head of what success always looks like. I mean, the things that I really try to hone in on are, kind of that Venn diagram of what are the things that I really enjoy doing? What are the things that I'm good at? And which of those things actually can bring value to my organization? And what does the intersection of those things potentially look like? I mean, now some of that could be certainly, there couldn't be that job, or there's like growth opportunity embedded in there, or things that I might not necessarily know that I'm, interested in because I haven't done it as of yet. But, I sort of believe that you should lean into those things that make you more you and are more authentic to who you are. And while you certainly need to have competency around a lot of areas, I think, leaning into the things that you're really good at and the things that you really enjoy is a better approach than constantly trying to, focus in on the things that maybe you're not quite as good at. Of course, having some competency there, but really leaning into that. So that's really how I've thought about what my career aspirations are. Where can I bring value? Where do I get the most enjoyment out of it? And then what are the things that I'm good at? And what's the overlay of those things?
I agree with everything Carmen said, and I will add, having a curious mind and being intentional goes a long way. For me, an example that I can give, before I moved into this corporate responsibility role, as I mentioned, I was in human resources my entire career. I haven't done anything outside of HR. And it was me having a conversation with a senior leader probably 4 or 5 years ago that introduced me to the KeyBank Foundation. And at the time, I wasn't interested in a job. I was just curious about, well, what do we do? Like what's the primary responsibility or mission? And then I always kept in touch with that executive leader. And then we had an opportunity that came up 2 or 3 years ago, and I thought, well, that sounds like an interesting opportunity. You know, most of the jobs are within certain markets, and again, it wasn't necessarily on my radar to move into corporate responsibility, but the fact that I had those ongoing conversations with our foundation leader over the years, and just kind of learned a little bit about the role and the team and the work that we do, when the opportunity became available, and the person who was in my role had been in this role for, at least 15 years. So again, it wasn't a job on my radar because I didn't really think he was going to go anywhere, honestly. But because I was inquisitive and just curious about the team, when the job opportunity became available, I had applied. And I didn't have any technical experience in corporate responsibility, but what I had was developed a relationship. I had very established, strong relationships with our executive team locally. And I had experience in outreach efforts, and I had partnerships in other areas within the community. And so while there was still a learning curve, it allowed me the opportunity to apply. And so I've always encouraged our employees to have coffee conversations, is what we call them, just to learn about other lines of businesses and the work that they do. And not necessarily in a way where, I'm going to meet with you because I want your job, but more out of just learning. Because if we all know more about what our partners are doing and how we can impact their production and their performance and their outcomes, then we all become better partners. And we all work together, and we're all just more productive. And so we've always encouraged having those conversations just to learn more about other line of businesses and groups. And for many people, that's how a lot of folks within KeyBank have learned about something that they had no idea about before. And it was like, I didn't think about that. That would be a great opportunity, or I know someone else that would be a great fit. So anyway, just having a curious mind and being intentional, I think goes a long way.
Anyone else want to add anything to that? I think with the couple of minutes we have left, I want to do a speed round. So we're all going to answer this quickly. What do you see as the future of professional development, given all the challenges and changes in the corporate enterprise environment now? Jen, start with you.
I think it's going to be more fluid than ever. If in answer to the last question, I was going to say that I've used strengths finders myself to figure out what my own strengths are. And for me, it's about being part of a team. And, I learned very early in my management career not to hire people that are good at the same things I am, because I'm already good at that. Why do I need that? I need somebody who's good at the things that I'm not good at. And so I think it's going to be just more fluid and, more dynamic. And, that zigzag that I mentioned in the career paths is going to be a lot of different things than what we thought about traditionally. And I think that's a good thing.
Carmen?
Yes, I mean, I think that it'll be essentially more fluid. I think that some of like the larger, more bureaucratic processes will be less relevant. I think there's going to be a huge push on transparency because it's going to be much more individualized. I also think there's going to be a huge focus on how to remove bias out of our systems. And, you know, it's less about sort of like the individual, but much more about how organizations begin to really address their systems and make sure that, like, when it comes to professional development and performance management, we've really been thoughtful about removing bias out of the system so that everyone is kind of, you know, has equity in the process.
Curtis, real quick.
Yeah, I would agree. I see more fluidity. I see more employees taking their own development, career development in their hands. And I agree about the leveling the playing field, basically, you know, taking out that bias, whether it's gender bias or racial and ethnic bias.
Cassandra?
I would agree with everyone. I don't have much to add. I think I guess the only piece I would add is the employee behavior and measurement of soft skills. I think have become really, really valuable and important, even over the technical skills, because we all know technical skills can be learned, right? But it's the behavior and those soft skills that a lot of people struggle with, and I think that right now, moving forward, is going to be really, really critical, and not only in one's own development, but also going back to what Curtis was saying in regard to just developing the organizational culture that you're trying to create and make sure it's sustained. So if you're claiming that you have an inclusive, respectable, transparent environment, you want to make sure that the employees also value those behaviors and competencies and really live them out.
Annalisa, 30 seconds.
Absolutely. I think authenticity and well-being are trends that we're going to see long-term. And I also think that now that we're moving more to digital communications, things that can be recorded or shared easily, you're also going to have more ways for employees to hold you accountable, because as we're increasing transparency and access, your messaging needs to be consistent and congruent from your top, you know, your senior manager all the way down to the person on the front line. So I do think that's going to be something that many of us are going to have to continue to think about and embrace.
Thank you. And thank you all for your insights and your wisdom. I'm going to turn it over to Nick.
Hello, this is Nick again. Thanks, Lydia. Thanks to all of our wonderful speakers, Annalisa, Carmen, Curtis, Cassandra, Jennifer. It was a great conversation, and thanks again to Indeed and to CultureAmp and to all of you for participating today. If you'd like to join for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co. That's FROMDAYONE.co to check out more of our upcoming webinars. And this Thursday, September 24th, 2 days from now, we're going to be doing our second full-scale virtual conference. It's a little different than the webinar you're on now. It's a full-on conference that has panel discussions, workshops, networking, the ability to chat with other participants, booths, and so on and so forth. They're really neat. We use the Hopin platform. We're really excited about it. The focus for this one is how to lead now, managing change and building resilience. You can visit our website, fromday1.co, to learn more. We have some really, really impressive keynote speakers for this one, so check it out. And Wednesday, October 7th, how to drive systematic change by coaching your key influencers. That's another webinar much like this one. Take a look at our website to get details and to register. Thanks again for joining today, and we'll see you next time.